Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. It's very important, that last part of the verse. They filled them up to the brim, to the very top. For the first time, the newly ordained curate was about to conduct his first wedding. He became worried about what he'd do if the best man dropped the ring down the heating grating. Fortunately, we don't have such problems here at St. Nicholas's. We don't have that kind of heating. So he hastily went into the nearest jeweller's without putting on his dog collar and said to the lady behind the counter, "I want the biggest and the cheapest wedding ring that you've got." Astonished, she asked the young man, "And who just are you marrying?" Without thinking, he replied, "Well, quite a lot of people, actually." Of course, he had a lot of explaining to do. He was worried that things might go wrong at the wedding. It's very nervous business when you conduct a wedding for the first time. I remember doing such a thing myself, not dropping the ring down the grating, but worried sick about getting it wrong, particularly the legal aspect. And it haunts you. What happens if I get the vows mixed up? Well, that happened to me, I must say, when I was doing a wedding in my second parish, and I was helping the Rural Dean, and it was out at Hastings, and I went to the little St. John's Church in the Wood, as it's called. And I was so nervous. It was probably about my fourth or fifth wedding that I'd conducted. And I turned to the bridegroom, and I said, "Wilt thou have this man to thy loved husband?" And he said, "No." Well, which made me worse, because then I started fumbling in the page until I got it right. I was worried sick about getting the words mixed up, worried about the ring falling down the grating, and also making sure that what was said was right, getting the legal words right. But of course, when we go to such a gathering, it's a happy time. It's a happy time, and we join in the festivities of the bride and the groom and the families getting together. And Jesus himself was at such an occasion. I suppose he wasn't worried about whether the rabbi had got the vows mixed up, or it wasn't his concern. In fact, he said to his mother, "Why are you troubling me? My hour has not yet come. It's not my time to worry about such matters. Particularly, it's not my time whether the bride's father will be embarrassed because they have run out of wine and the guests have nothing to drink. It's not my worry." But the wedding at Cana in Galilee is in particularly the New Testament, St. John's Gospel, and it's there for a reason, because St. John tells us that this was the first of the miraculous signs that Jesus performed. And as we know from our knowledge of John, the miracles are called signs. And what is a sign? Sign points us to something that's happening at that particular time. All over the parish for the last couple of weeks, we've had signs saying book sale coming up. There was a sign put out yesterday saying book sale this way. There's another sign to say that the new film, The King's Speech, will be being shown in our church hall. Signs, posters, information about what's happening. And these signs in St. John's Gospel are there to point us to something which is about to happen or is taking place at that time. It's very easy to sum up, if you like, the Jewish faith as kind of being a religion of rules, regulations, sticking to the law. That would be inaccurate. The Jewish faith is far more deeper than merely obeying the law of Moses, washing the cups, making sure that everything is done as the law requires. Because that would be to treat one of the great monotheistic religions as kind of a religion of mere rules, regulations, and thou shalt nots, when really the Jewish faith is much deeper than that. Before the New Testament, of course, all we had were the prophets and the law of Moses. But with the dawning of the New Testament and the arrival of Jesus, the birth of Jesus in his life and in his ministry, he said that I have come to fulfill all that was spoken about in the Old Testament. And of course, when Jesus came and performed this miraculous sign at this Jewish wedding, because remember, Jesus himself was circumcised on the 8th day. He was presented in the temple 40 days after his birth. He was brought up in the faith and the traditions of the people of Israel, the Hebrew people, the people of the Old Covenant. And so when we think of our Lord, we must think of him living in this context, living in this environment, if you like. And so the wedding that he was at was a typical wedding of the day. The whole village would have been invited. It wasn't just the family and the friends, close friends of the bride and groom. It would be everybody. That was how weddings were conducted in those days. And in certain parts of the world today, particularly in Greece, the small Greek islands, and in other places, I'm sure, the whole village is invited to the wedding. I'm pleased to say that this year at St Nicholas we have quite a number of weddings already booked in the diary for the summer, and also we have, of course, the royal wedding coming up of Prince William and his bride-to-be, Katie. So weddings are very much in the air at the moment. They are happy occasions. Eating and drinking together is one of life's pleasures. And at a wedding reception, all these come together as one. So it was wise of Jesus to choose a wedding reception to first reveal his glory to his friends and to his neighbours. And when the wine ran out, Jesus turned the water into the choicest of wines. I don't know how it happened. It was a miracle. It was simply took place. That's all we are told in the text. But when you think of it, a grapevine performs the miracle of turning water into wine every year. Just think about it. A grapevine turns water into wine every year. So all Jesus had to do was to speed up the natural process, I suppose. But once we start trying to examine the details of the miracle, then we get into all sorts of difficulties. Yet the result was full of symbolic meaning. The water was there. We read from the Jewish rites of purification as part of the religion of the day. The great stone water pots would be blessed, and the water would be used for ceremonial washing. I suppose a bit like how we would treat our holy water in the font. The cleansing from sin, the starting afresh, the washing, if you like. But in the Old Testament context, it was done merely without the grace of the new. They tried to earn God's forgiveness by a desperate struggle for purity and righteousness. But by contrast, Jesus taught a happy confidence in a God who's like the father of the prodigal son, coming out to meet us halfway. In the Old Testament picture, we see God seated on his throne. Yes, he sent the prophets. Yes, he raised up people like Moses to give us the law. But that's as far as it went. In the dawning of the New Testament, with Jesus being born in the way that he was, Jesus, God, the Trinity, was coming out to meet us halfway. And that's the difference between the old and the new. For the religion of the New Testament is a religion of grace. Unearned, unmerited, undeserved grace. today is a religion of joy and happiness. But of course, where we would part company would be in the person, acknowledging the person of Jesus and who he is. He compared his teaching with new wine, which bursts the stiff old wineskins of tradition and bubbles with a ferment of fresh ideas. It's like opening a bottle of wonderful champagne with the bubbles and the cork popping out. That's what I like to think the New Testament is. Bursting the old wineskins of tradition and what has gone before. And St. John tells us that Jesus said to them, "Now fill the jars with water to the brim." They filled them to the very, very top. And literally the words which we translate thus mean up to above or to the very top, to the brim. Bishop Stephen Vernet wrote a book about John's Gospel called Water into Wine. It's a rather old book now by today's standards. He pointed out how many times in John's Gospel there's a contrast between above and below. In Greek, between the words ano and kato. Well, to help his readers remember these words, ano and kato, above and below, Bishop Vernet reminded them of the nursery rhyme, which runs, "Pussycat, pussycat, where have you been? I've been up to London to see the Queen. Pussycat, pussycat, what did you there? I frightened a little mouse under the chair."